Before the multi-million-dollar deals, the TV cameras, or the screaming matches that became legendary, Orange County Choppers was just a humble family business tucked away in Rock Tavern, New York. It started with a man named Paul Tootle Sr., a gruff steelworker with a passion for motorcycles and a dream to build something more. In the late 1990s, Sr. began crafting custom choppers out of the back of his steel fabrication shop, turning scrap into rolling art. He didn't care about polish or polishers. He cared about muscle, noise, and impact. Enter Paul Tootle Jr., his son, and creative opposite. While Sr. was all fire and brute force, Jr. had an eye for sleek design, balance, and aesthetics. Together, they were oil and water, but it worked. Their chemistry, whether volatile or visionary, was undeniable. When the Discovery Channel came calling in 2002, no one, not even the Tootles themselves, could have predicted what would happen next. American Chopper hit TV screens at a time when reality TV was booming. But unlike polished Hollywood shows, this was raw, unscripted chaos with power tools and paint fumes. Audiences were instantly hooked. It wasn't just the incredible bikes. It was the explosive dynamic between Sr., Jr., and their crew. Yelling matches turned into viral moments. Deadlines brought dramatic tension. Builds went from concept to delivery under impossible pressure. By 2004, OCC had exploded into a full-blown phenomenon. The small-town shop morphed into a 92,000-square-foot facility, complete with showrooms, offices, and a sprawling fabrication floor. They had merchandise, licensing deals, a line of die-cast toys, and even energy drinks with their name on the can. Their bikes were being built for celebrities, corporations, even government agencies. Orange County Choppers wasn't just a custom bike shop anymore, it was an empire. But as the world watched the Tootles build steel masterpieces, few realized something else was being built behind the scenes. Tension. Cracks were forming under the surface, and the higher OCC climbed, the harder it would fall. The Tootles weren't just building bikes, they were building tension. The working dynamic between Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. had always been combustible, even in the early days. Sr. was the hammer, aggressive, old school, no nonsense. Jr. was the chisel, precise, methodical, and increasingly bold in his vision. On camera, it made for great TV. Off camera, it was eroding everything. By 2008, the stress of high-stakes builds, back-to-back deadlines, and a rapidly growing empire had pushed the father-son relationship to a breaking point. The cameras rolled as shouting matches escalated into full-blown wars. Doors were slammed. Tools were thrown. Episodes turned into therapy sessions with sparks and sheet metal. The boiling point came when Jr. was fired. On camera. The news rocked fans, but insiders weren't surprised. The shop had become a pressure cooker. Key team members like Rick Petco and Vinny DiMartino felt the strain. Some quietly left. Others stayed, but admitted morale was sinking fast. What followed was a brutal legal battle. Paul Jr. filed a lawsuit over his 20% ownership stake in OCC, demanding fair value after his dismissal. Sr. fired back with a countersuit. The once iconic duo that fans rooted for had become bitter opponents, embroiled in a public, televised feud that was as ugly as it was heartbreaking. Behind the drama, OCC was starting to falter. The work was still impressive, but the energy had changed. The shop felt different. The passion was being replaced by production schedules and courtroom deadlines. And fans, once loyal, began to tune out. Not because of the builds, but because of the bitterness. The family brand was fractured. And the cost of that divide? Far greater than any missed deadline or busted weld. With Junior gone and the show trying to press on, Orange County choppers faced a new kind of challenge. One that couldn't be fixed with a wrench or a fresh coat of paint. Business. In the mid-2000s, at the height of their fame, OCC moved into a 92,000 square foot mega facility, complete with a showroom, retail shop, offices, and fabrication bays. It was a symbol of their success and a financial anchor. Overhead costs skyrocketed. Maintaining the building alone cost hundreds of thousands per year. Meanwhile, the world was changing. The recession hit in 2008, and custom choppers, once symbols of American excess, fell out of fashion. Buyers tightened their wallets, sponsors pulled out, demand declined. OCC, once flooded with orders, now had to hunt for customers. Merchandise sales, once a gold mine, slowed. TV ratings began slipping. Licensing deals dried up. As financial pressures mounted, cracks turned to collapses. Reports surfaced of unpaid debts, lawsuits from vendors, and even foreclosure proceedings tied to the massive OCC headquarters. Tutul Sr. found himself battling more than just family. He was battling creditors, tax liens, and public perception. For a company that once symbolized power and independence, OCC had become bloated. The brand couldn't pivot fast enough. The bikes stayed loud, but the cash flow went quiet. And the American dream they'd built? It was starting to look more like a cautionary tale. In 2018, fans got what they thought they wanted: a reunion. American Chopper. The return hit the airwaves with the promise of reconciliation. Senior and Junior were back on screen. The sparks were still there, but something had changed. Gone was the raw energy of the early years. The tension felt managed. The builds, though still impressive, lacked the fire that once made the show must-watch TV. And the storyline, father and son healing old wounds, resonated, but it wasn't enough to sustain the momentum. Viewership was lukewarm. The motorcycle market had shifted. Younger fans were tuning into YouTube, not cable. And the flashy choppers of yesteryear were now seen as outdated. Still, Paul Sr. pushed forward. He opened OCC Roadhouse and Museum in Florida, a hybrid bar, restaurant, and bike exhibit. The vision was clear: reinvent OCC as an entertainment destination, not just a bike shop. But critics and fans alike said it felt more like a tribute to the past than a blueprint for the future. Without the same team, the same cultural relevance, or a connection to modern trends, OCC struggled to reignite its brand. They tried to bring back the magic. But without the original fire, even legends can't outrun time. At first, the chaos was part of the charm. Viewers tuned in to see not just bikes, but blow-ups. It was the first time reality TV had fused fabrication with family dysfunction. And for a while, it worked. But over time, fans began to feel it. The arguments grew stale, the yelling predictable. What once felt real now felt manufactured. Critics started to pounce. Articles accused the show of scripting tension and milking drama. Longtime fans on forums like Reddit and Chopper Exchange began posting threads like, "Are they even building anything anymore?" And "Where's the soul?" The dynamic between Senior and Junior, once volatile but electric, had become toxic. Even when Junior came back for the revival, the fire felt forced. The shop was bigger, the builds were flashier, but the heart was missing. Then came the flood of spin-offs and merchandise: OCC-branded headphones, energy drinks, even slot machines. For many fans, it felt like OCC wasn't about custom bikes anymore. It was about cashing in. And nothing turns an audience faster than the feeling they're being sold instead of inspired. By the time the 2000s rolled around, fan interest had waned. The OCC brand had become a shadow of what it once was, more museum than movement. And for a company that built its identity on grit and rebellion, that kind of shift was fatal. While the spotlight was always on Paul Sr. and Jr., American Chopper was built by a team. And one by one, that team vanished. Rick Petco, the quiet craftsman and fan favorite, eventually left to start his own business, trading TV drama for the peace of a small Pennsylvania fabrication shop. Vinnie DiMartino, another respected builder, left even earlier, citing burnout and frustration with the show's direction. He later started his own shop, V-Force Customs, and maintained a loyal following. Even lovable Mikey, the comedic relief of OCC, stepped away, struggling with personal issues and publicly discussing his battles with mental health and the pressures of fame. Their exits weren't just departures, they were a symptom. Behind the cameras, OCC was no longer a shop, but a pressure cooker. Long hours, impossible deadlines, and the looming presence of film crews had changed everything. Interviews with former crew members painted a consistent picture. What started as a passion project had become a toxic workplace, driven more by ratings than wrenching. The cast wasn't just quitting TV, they were reclaiming their lives. In the early 2000s, custom choppers were king. Long forks, stretched frames, wild paint jobs. It was the era of attitude on two wheels. But like all trends, it didn't last. By the mid-2000s teens, the industry had evolved. Riders began shifting toward performance-focused machines. Cafe racers, scramblers, baggers with real-world comfort and modern tech. The era of $80,000 garage queens was over. YouTube exploded with DIY builders. Social media gave rise to underground bike cultures that were leaner, faster, and more in touch with modern riders. OCC's larger-than-life builds suddenly looked outdated. And unlike new school builders who interacted daily with fans online, OCC stayed locked in a 2004 time capsule. No behind-the-scenes live streams, no tutorials, just the same old format. Build, yell, deliver, repeat. As the world changed, OCC stayed still. And in an industry that runs on innovation, standing still is the same as falling behind. In a last-ditch effort to reignite the brand, Paul Sr. made a bold move. He left the original New York headquarters behind and headed south, to Florida. The plan? Rebrand Orange County Choppers as a lifestyle experience. Enter the OCC Roadhouse and Museum, part biker bar, part restaurant, part retail shop, and part shrine to the past. It wasn't just about bikes anymore, it was about selling nostalgia. At first, the idea seemed promising. Fans still held affection for OCC. The Roadhouse opened with fanfare, bike nights, celebrity appearances, and wall-to-wall OCC memorabilia. But even with the flashy exterior, the deeper issue remained. The brand was still leaning on what it used to be, rather than evolving into what it could be. Critics called it a museum disguised as a comeback. Younger fans didn't connect with the bar and merch approach, and longtime supporters couldn't help but feel that the new OCC was more a tourist trap than a temple of custom motorcycles. The Roadhouse might have bought OCC time, but it couldn't rewrite the past, and it couldn't bring back the soul that so many felt was lost. Now, over 2 decades since its rise to fame, the story of OCC raises a bigger question. Was it a success story or a cautionary tale? Paul Tutul Sr. is still active in the biker world. He still builds bikes. He still makes appearances. But the days of million-dollar builds and worldwide premieres are over. Paul Jr., for his part, found peace outside the brand. He founded Paul Jr. Designs restored his relationship with his father somewhat, and even returned briefly for the show's revival, on his own terms. The two are no longer enemies, but the damage done during the peak years left scars. Fans still remember the builds, the theme bikes, the raw emotion. But many also remember the disappointment, the brand that got too big, too fast, and broke under its own weight. Orange County Choppers was lightning in a bottle. It brought custom motorcycles to mainstream television. It inspired a generation of builders. It proved that a father, a son, and a shared passion could capture the imagination of millions. But it also showed what happens when ego overshadows vision, when fame outpaces foundation, and when reality TV turns real life into collateral damage. OCC isn't what it once was, but its legacy is undeniable. And for all the shouting, the lawsuits, the rise and fall, the bikes still roll. Because in the end, the builds endure, even if the empire didn't.